Welcome to Framework, the podcast that makes the NIST cybersecurity framework practical, engaging, and accessible. Whether you're a cybersecurity professional, business leader, or simply curious about how organizations defend against cyber threats, this series is for you. This podcast is inspired by a comprehensive guide to the NIST Cybersecurity Framework 2.0, a best-selling resource written by cybersecurity expert Dr. Jason Edwards and trusted by professionals worldwide. In each episode, we'll leverage a few insights from Jason's extensive book to dive deep into CSF 2.0, unpacking every function, category, and subcategory with real-world applications you can immediately use. If you're enjoying this episode and want to learn more, head over to cyberauthor.me to grab your copy of the book and access additional resources to enhance your cybersecurity journey. You can also visit baremetalcyber.com, where over 2 million people last year explored expert insights, articles, and practical tools across a wide range of cybersecurity topics. PR.PS-02 personnel screening is conducted. PR.PS-02 ensures that organizations implement thorough personnel screening procedures to reduce insider threats and prevent unauthorized access to sensitive systems and data. This subcategory belongs to the Protect function within the National Institute of Standards and Technology Cybersecurity Framework version 2.0, emphasizing that cybersecurity is not just about technology. It also requires vetting the individuals who have access to critical assets. By conducting proper background checks, identity verifications, and risk assessments, organizations can prevent malicious insiders, negligent employees, or external infiltrators from compromising sensitive data or operations. Screening personnel is a critical cybersecurity practice that supports access control, risk management, and regulatory compliance. Employees, contractors, and third-party service providers often have access to valuable intellectual property, customer data, and proprietary systems. Without proper screening, organizations risk granting access to individuals who may pose security threats, whether through intentional misconduct or negligence. Background checks, employment verification, and security clearances provide an additional layer of defense by ensuring that only trustworthy and qualified personnel are granted access to critical assets. Personnel screening affects multiple stakeholders within an organization. Human resources teams are responsible for conducting background checks and verifying employment history before onboarding new hires. Security and compliance teams ensure that screening processes align with regulatory requirements and cybersecurity best practices, particularly in industries such as finance, healthcare, and government contracting, where strict security standards apply. Executive leadership and hiring managers play a role in defining the scope and depth of screening procedures, ensuring that security measures do not create unnecessary hiring bottlenecks, while still protecting sensitive assets. Personnel screening is conducted to verify the identity, background, and trustworthiness of individuals before they are granted access to an organization's systems, facilities, or sensitive data. This process helps prevent internal security breaches, fraud, espionage, and data theft by ensuring that employees and contractors meet security requirements before gaining access to critical assets. Effective personnel screening involves multiple layers of verification, including criminal background checks, financial history assessments, reference verification, and security clearance validation for high-risk roles. Several key terms define the personnel screening process and its role in cybersecurity. Background checks involve verifying an individual's criminal history, employment history, and qualifications to determine potential security risks. Identity verification ensures that an individual's credentials are legitimate, preventing identity fraud and unauthorized access attempts. Security clearances are formal authorizations granted by regulatory bodies that allow individuals to access classified or sensitive information based on their background and role. Insider threat assessment involves evaluating the risk of an employee or contractor intentionally or unintentionally compromising security. Continuous monitoring refers to the ongoing evaluation of personnel security status, ensuring that access privileges remain appropriate over time. Misconceptions about personnel screening can lead to incomplete or ineffective security measures. One common challenge is assuming that background checks at the time of hiring are sufficient, without implementing continuous monitoring or periodic rescreening. Employees may become security risks over time due to financial pressures, personal grievances, or external coercion requiring ongoing assessment beyond the initial hiring phase. Another issue is failing to apply consistent screening procedures across full-time employees, contractors, and third-party vendors, leading to gaps in security policies. Finally, some organizations mistakenly believe that automated background checks alone are sufficient, without considering contextual risk factors such as job role, access level, and past performance. Personnel screening is a proactive security measure that ensures organizations only grant access to trusted individuals, reducing the risk of insider threats and unauthorized activity. This subcategory enhances access control, workforce security, and regulatory compliance by verifying that individuals handling sensitive systems, financial transactions, and intellectual property meet predefined security criteria. Without structured screening processes, organizations increase their exposure to data breaches, financial fraud, and operational disruptions caused by unvetted employees or third parties. Organizations that fail to conduct thorough personnel screening expose themselves to significant security risks, including insider threats, fraud, and data breaches. Without proper screening, individuals with criminal backgrounds, financial instability, or ties to malicious entities may gain access to sensitive systems, increasing the risk of unauthorized data exfiltration, intellectual property theft, or sabotage. Negligent hiring practices can also lead to regulatory violations, particularly in industries where compliance mandates stringent background checks, such as healthcare, finance, and government contracting. The absence of screening protocols weakens an organization's overall security posture, making it more vulnerable to both deliberate and accidental security breaches. Effective personnel screening enhances trust, security, and compliance by ensuring that employees and contractors meet security requirements before gaining access to critical systems. Organizations that implement comprehensive screening protocols reduce the likelihood of insider threats and strengthen workforce integrity. Regular screening not only prevents unauthorized access, but also reinforces compliance with data protection laws, reducing legal and financial liabilities. Organizations that maintain clear and consistent screening policies also enhance stakeholder and customer confidence, demonstrating a commitment to workforce security and risk management. At the partial tier, organizations may lack formal screening procedures or apply inconsistent background checks across different roles. Hiring decisions may be based solely on basic employment verification, without considering criminal history, financial background, or insider threat risk factors. A small business at this level might only conduct identity verification and employment reference checks, but fail to screen employees handling sensitive customer data, leaving the organization exposed to fraud, data theft, or compliance violations. At the risk-informed tier, organizations begin implementing structured screening policies, ensuring that employees undergo standardized background checks before gaining access to sensitive systems. However, screening depth and frequency may vary, and contractors or third-party vendors may not be screened at the same level as full-time employees. A mid-sized company at this level may perform criminal background checks for employees in financial roles, but fail to screen IT administrators who have access to confidential infrastructure, creating security gaps. At the repeatable tier, organizations enforce consistent and well-documented screening processes across all workforce categories, including employees, contractors, and third-party service providers. Screening policies are regularly reviewed and updated to align with new threat intelligence and regulatory requirements. A financial institution at this level may require pre-employment background checks, periodic rescreening, and insider threat evaluations for employees handling customer financial data, ensuring that personnel risk is continuously assessed. At the adaptive tier, organizations integrate automation, continuous monitoring, and risk-based screening methodologies to dynamically assess personnel security risks. AI-powered screening tools analyze behavioral patterns, financial distress indicators, and anomaly detection models to identify potential insider threats before they materialize. A global technology firm at this level may use real-time identity verification, biometric authentication, and continuous personnel risk assessments to ensure only trustworthy individuals maintain access to critical systems. Personnel screening aligns with several controls in the National Institute of Standards and Technology, Special Publication 800-53, ensuring organizations establish structured workforce security measures. One key control is PS-3, personnel screening, which mandates that organizations implement background checks, identity verification, and risk assessments before granting access to sensitive data and systems. A healthcare provider implementing this control may conduct criminal history checks and drug screenings for employees handling patient records, ensuring compliance with healthcare data protection regulations. Another relevant control is PS-5, personnel transfer, which requires organizations to reevaluate access privileges when employees change roles or departments. This ensures that security clearances and access permissions are adjusted based on updated risk assessments. A financial institution implementing this control may re-screen employees who transition from general IT support roles to privileged system administration, ensuring that new responsibilities align with updated security requirements. Personnel screening also aligns with IA-4 Identify Management, which requires organizations to ensure that individuals accessing systems have been properly vetted and assigned unique traceable identities. This control ensures that only authorized personnel with verified credentials can access critical infrastructure, reducing the risk of unauthorized access and identity fraud. A defense contractor implementing this control may require multi-step identity verification and background checks before issuing access credentials to employees handling classified data, ensuring strict access control based on trustworthiness and clearance level. These controls can be adapted based on organizational size, industry, and risk exposure. A small business may implement basic background checks during onboarding but lack ongoing screening processes for long-term employees. A large enterprise may require continuous personnel risk assessments, rescreening protocols, and integration with workforce identity management systems, ensuring that access permissions remain aligned with personnel trust levels. Organizations operating in highly regulated industries, such as finance and healthcare, may implement real-time personnel monitoring, leveraging AI-driven risk assessment tools to detect insider threats and anomalies in workforce behavior. Auditors evaluate personnel screening effectiveness by reviewing whether structured screening policies, documented background check procedures, and risk-based personnel assessments are implemented and followed. They examine whether screening processes align with industry regulations, data protection requirements, and insider threat mitigation frameworks. If an organization fails to enforce consistent personnel screening across all workforce categories, auditors may issue findings that highlight security gaps, unauthorized access risks, or noncompliance with regulatory standards. To verify compliance, auditors seek specific types of evidence. Screening policy documents and background check records demonstrate that organizations follow structured vetting processes for employees and contractors. Access privilege audit logs provide insights into whether employees who fail screening requirements have been properly restricted from sensitive systems. Personnel risk assessment reports show how organizations evaluate and mitigate insider threat risks over time, ensuring that workforce security remains aligned with evolving cybersecurity threats. A compliance success scenario could involve a financial institution that undergoes an audit and provides detailed screening records showing that employees in high-risk roles, such as fraud prevention and financial transactions, undergo periodic background checks and continuous monitoring. Auditors confirm that employees with financial distress indicators or suspicious activity patterns are flagged for additional screening or access restrictions, ensuring proactive insider threat mitigation. In contrast, an organization that fails to conduct background checks for employees handling sensitive financial data may face compliance violations for inadequate workforce security measures. Organizations face multiple barriers when implementing effective personnel screening. One challenge is resistance to screening expansion, where employees or leadership view background checks and continuous monitoring as intrusive or unnecessary. Without leadership support, organizations may struggle to enforce structured screening policies. Another challenge is inconsistent screening practices, where full-time employees are screened thoroughly, but contractors and third-party vendors are not held to the same standards, creating security gaps. A final challenge is resource limitations, where organizations lack the personnel, funding, or automation tools needed to conduct large-scale workforce security assessments. Organizations can overcome these barriers by integrating automated personnel screening tools, establishing uniform screening policies for all workforce members, and implementing continuous insider risk assessments. Investing in AI-driven workforce monitoring solutions allows organizations to detect anomalies, flag high-risk personnel, and refine access privileges dynamically. Standardizing screening across employees, contractors, and third-party vendors ensures consistent security measures across the entire workforce. By embedding personnel screening into broader cybersecurity and risk management strategies, organizations can reduce insider threat risks, maintain compliance, and strengthen their overall security posture. That wraps up today's discussion on framework. Don't stop here. Head over to cyberauthor.me to explore more cybersecurity topics and discover a best-selling book covering NIST and other critical cyber frameworks. Please like, rate, and review this episode on Apple and Spotify. Until next time, remember that knowledge is power.